Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Good morning, good afternoon, and or good evening, legends. Congratulations on your superb selection of podcasts today. Sit back for the next 45 minutes, secure in the knowledge that your legend status is on the increase as your list of sparkling party conversation topics is about to increase by about 9. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. And on today's episode, we get one more piece to building Steve Austin, the $6 million man, the bionic man of the 1970s. Today we've managed to get the hand right. We're still a little way off a complete rebuild, but we at least have hands. We've also got a development in the world of batteries that'll make your next trip to Saturn a bit easier, and we'll see what sort of shenanigans AI has been up to in recent weeks. More on that internet hooligan later on for now, but let me bring to the microphone the cleverest bloke for miles. It's Matthew Dickerson. How are you, mate?
We need a universal term rather than good morning, good afternoon, good evening, don't we? Good day, is that good enough? But it could be night.
I'm sure they've got it in other languages, and I'm sure we've got one in English that's not coming to my brain right now.
It's too complicated. You've got to check your watch. It's getting
G'day.
Towards the middle of the day. And
you can say g'day, can't you? That's just universal.
And I suppose at night time you've worked out that it's probably not daytime, so you could say good night. But then it sounds like you're sending someone off to bed. If you saw someone out at a restaurant, good night, James, how you going? Good night. Why are you saying good night to me? Good day, It's not daytime.
You're sending me off, eh? We just met. We just arrived.
You're saying I'm too drunk, I need to go to bed. What are you saying about me? So this week I had an incident that occurred, not to me directly, but a friend of mine, and I certainly helped him out in the situation, that was a bad story, but then a good story from a technology perspective. So it started off with a friend having a car stolen. So that's not a good story. And it was an old-fashioned car that you couldn't track like one of the modern EVs that you and I drive where you could actually track the car. But the person who stole the car grabbed the handbag out of my friend's hand and jumped in the car, knowing that a modern car at least has a key that you can leave in your handbag and then drive it off and away you go. So no key to be inserted. Off the person went. Happy days, he's got a car, thank you very much. My friend's there going, well, that's not good. I'd like to get my car back. And by the way, my handbag's got my phone and my keys to the house and all the rest of the things.
These days when you lose your phone, it's worse than losing your wallet.
Indeed. But of course then she said, hold on, my phone is an iPhone. That means we should be able to track it. So a couple of phone calls later, the police are on the prowl, if you like. And using information from via my iPhone, they captured the guy within an hour. He was probably he'd driven about 100 kilometres and they captured him. Fantastic, just on the iPhone data, via my iPhone data. But when they got him, no handbag to be seen. So they basically asked the guy, and he wasn't that cooperative. But the phone itself leaves a last known location, and where he'd gone to dropped out of reception eventually. And so I talked to my friend and said, look, we'll go for a drive. Went for a drive with her husband and myself and a couple of other people. We'll just go a little mini search party and we'll go and see if we can find your phone. Obviously, he's thrown it out the car window somewhere. Let's see if we can find it. So we've got the map, got the last known location. I'm comparing that to my phone to see exactly what it looked like so you get a direct comparison. And we drove along and I went, I reckon we're getting pretty close. Let's stop about here. So the four of us got out, ready to go, side by side, holding hands, making sure we don't miss
the game you walk, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got there and I'm looking around and I said, right, I reckon within about a 50-metre radius, here it is. It was that close. And
Just on the side of the road?
It was on the side of the road. It was about a metre off the bitumen. I was ready to go up in the grass somewhere, figuring the guy.
Well, lucky you didn't run over it.
Well, it was that close. You almost, if you went off the road a little bit, you would have run over it. It was in the dirt, but no more than a metre off the edge of the bitumen. But I thought he would have thrown it with some sort of force out the window, but it's almost like he's dropped it out the window. Maybe he stopped and went, oh, I know there's a phone here, I'll throw that out. And then, of course, the key. So the issue here that my friend was particularly worried about was in the phone, there was a phone wallet as a driver's licence. There was a set of keys. There was a set of car keys to another car. So it wouldn't take a genius, and maybe they're not that smart thieves that do this sort of stuff, but it wouldn't take a genius to go, there's a driver's licence, there's a set of keys. I wonder if I went to that location, if those keys would get me in the house, and there's another set of car keys to a different car, and I could load up that car with stuff that I took from that house and drive off with another car. Maybe I could do that. Now, by this time, he was already in prison, so, or not in prison, but in the lockup at the local police station. But just all of that is going through your mind when you've had stuff stolen. But another 2 metres away, and we didn't have a way of tracking the keys, but another 2 metres away, there's the car keys, there's the house keys, there's the set of keys on a keyring. So obviously he stopped or drove along and just threw it out the window. The phone was in perfect condition. The phone just needed to be charged up.
No smashed screen or anything?
It had a glass screen protector, had a good case on it, all the rest of it. So it obviously protected a bit, but there it all was. So just that ability to track where a device is. And I honestly thought we'd be out there for half an hour or walking along, peering down at the ground, looking through the grass, all the rest of it. I didn't expect it to be that short a time frame to find it. So anyway.
Thank you, modern technology.
It is a bit like that, isn't it?
And the gift that you gave this time.
Yeah, so there we go. So make sure you've got whatever phone you've got, that was an iPhone, but you've got an Android or whatever, make sure you've got those on and got some way of accessing it. Even do a little test run yourself sometimes just to see, accessing it from another phone, from another computer, that type of thing, just to see that you can track it. But a good outcome in the end.
Absolutely. All right, it's time to fulfill our promises by getting stuck into the stories for the week. Now, every couple of months, there becomes less and less reason behind range anxiety for the EV hesitant. As technology develops in this space, batteries improve more and more and more. The latest out of Chalmers University in Sweden sees them leaning heavily into carbon fibre composites. Matt, lighter batteries are on the way, and that means less power is required to move them, which means that EV ranges are set to stretch.
They're going a completely different way with this as well. It's not just about lighter batteries. I've got a bit of a problem here about whether or not the car is the battery or the battery is the car. Because in this particular scenario, they believe at Chalmers University they can create this carbon composite to build the car from that also doubles as
a battery.
Now, we've done a story some time ago now where concrete in a building could be used as a battery.
Yeah.
And so that's fine. That means you've got some sort of storage capacity in the building itself. So you can imagine a large skyscraper would have a lot of battery. In the way of a car, what you're really trying to do is reduce the weight of a car. Now, in a normal EV, and there's lots of variables, lots of different models, so I'm just going to use very round numbers here, about 500 kilograms of the car typically is battery. So that's a fair bit. Half a tonne is battery. The modern EV sedan, not a SUV style, but a sedan, might be 1,850 kilograms. So you can imagine 500 kilograms of that, that's a fair amount.
Yeah.
If you start to then take that apart and replace parts of that car with a carbon composite that also gives you a battery, it starts to get pretty exciting. So I did some numbers. I crunched a few numbers on how this might work. For example, if you look at the body shell of an EV, so typically in a Tesla, for example, it's aluminium. In most cars, it's just a mild steel, a pressed mild steel. You remove that body shell, it takes 300 kilograms off the weight of the car. Now, not that pleasant to drive because you're being buffeted by the wind, but replace that with a carbon composite. For a start, that carbon composite is lighter than aluminium or steel. So it might be 120 kilograms you save of that 300 kilograms in weight, but you also add a bit of battery. Now, you do the same with the chassis and the frame. Now, I have a question mark here about how good it would be to build the chassis and the frame out of a carbon composite, but surely carbon fibre. But leave that to the side for one moment. But the chassis itself is normally, the chassis and frame normally about 400 kilograms. So again, replace that, you save another 160 kilograms and add about 240 kilograms of battery storage. So if you just replace those two components, you've saved 280 kilograms off the weight of the car. You've added 420 kilograms worth of battery capacity. So that might mean you don't need the 500 kilo battery. Suddenly, your 1850 kilogram EV is down to 1100 kilograms. Now, I've got a large flaw in my plan. The typical energy density of a battery in an EV at the moment is about 250 watt hours per kilogram.
Right.
At the moment, Chalmers University have managed to get 30 watt hours per kilogram.
They're a bit short there.
Just a touch short.
But I mean, they don't have to
250.
go up to 250 to give the same responsiveness, but it's just, it's still well below the mark, isn't it?
That's right. Now, again, we are very early days at this stage. So we've talked about it a lot. Petrol engines have been developed for over 100 years. Batteries and various composites of batteries have been researched for a much shorter time frame, but it's serious now, so they're getting into it a bit more. So you're right.
And no one's been talking about carbon composites as well. And I'm just thinking, when you're building millions and millions of cars and you're building them out of carbon, isn't that taking carbon out of the carbon cycle?
I don't know.
There we go.
That's even deeper
It's
now.
achieving two ends to a means.
So the exciting part about this is that I think we'll be able to end up with lighter batteries, lighter cars. Now, Chalmers University claimed you'd extend the range by 70% by basically making the car out of a carbon composite that was the battery. My numbers didn't get 70%. That's a large difference.
Right.
Because remember, once the car is up and running, once it's accelerated to a certain speed, the weight of the car is not a major factor in how much energy you're using. It's more the rolling resistance and the air resistance. And we've talked about it before, double speed, quadruple air resistance.
Yeah.
So driving along the highway at 110, I imagine the weight of the car is minimal in the whole scheme of things in terms of battery usage. It's the air resistance and, to a lesser extent, the rolling resistance. Now, if you've got a lot of hills in the road, maybe because they're living in a hilly environment, maybe where they've got their 70% from, that's a bit different because you're having to drag all that weight up a hill, but you get a bit back when you go down the hill on the other side. So I don't get 70%, but I did certainly get figures up around 20% extra range with everything else being equal, same kilowatt hours of the car, etc., and just reduce that weight. Then I could see the numbers matching for 20%, which is still pretty impressive.
Well, if you're my EV has got a range, a theoretical range of 420, that goes up to 500. I think that's significant.
It is significant. So 20%. I'd like to see the numbers where Chalmers came up with their 70% from. Again, I couldn't get the numbers to match their 70%, but it's pretty exciting. But it gets better because think about mobile phones. If you actually open a mobile phone, and I wouldn't say go and do that with a working phone, but if you've got an older one, you see that most of the volume of that phone is taken up with battery. And you don't need a lot of battery in a mobile phone to keep it working for a day, for example. So imagine replacing that big battery. The rest of the components in there are pretty small. So if you made the shell of that out of a carbon fibre composite that was the battery, suddenly you might get to the stage where you're getting a phone that might be millimetres thick, credit card size thickness. Just think about the screen and the electronics, and that might be all you need because the rest of it's taken up with a battery shell. Computers, notebook computers, for example, the same sort of thing. A large part, if you open up a computer, a large part underneath the trackpad and sometimes a bit of the keyboard is the battery. And a computer uses a fair bit of power. So the real secret here is to increase that 30 watt hours per kilogram. If you could get that up to 100, maybe 150, it's getting up closer to the sort of capacity you get in a normal battery that you might have in a mobile phone or a notebook or an EV, and that gets pretty exciting. So,
yeah, an absolutely exciting development there, and certainly watch this space, folks.
Yeah, so I still come back to that, is you get to that question, does your car have a battery, or is the battery a car? Or is the car a battery? Is the battery a car? I'm not sure what I'm saying here, but something like that. You know, the car could be the battery.
Excellent. Now, this for the habitual campers and caravanners among us. There's nothing like a campfire cooked meal, but the dishwashing in a tub afterwards is a bit of a drawback. New to the market is a very compact, very portable dishwasher. It's quick, it uses very little water and very little power per cycle, so you can spend less time at the dishes and more time chatting around the hot coals of the campfire. Matt, this is a nifty little must-have for the glampers out there.
Well, I'm interested that you've gone straight to camping, because I was actually thinking I've been in houses, some older houses that just don't have a dishwasher.
Yeah.
And I feel very sorry for those people. I'm talking about getting a robot to pick up clothes off the floor, and yet there's people out there without a dishwasher. And I did enjoy, my family had 8 kids in the family, so I did enjoy, on reflection, maybe at the time I didn't, but I did enjoy upon reflection the time around washing dishes, drying.
Yeah.
You had the group of siblings would be standing around, and inevitably my big brother would get the tea towel and start flicking you as they did, and so you'd run around and complain to mum and all sorts of things.
It still happens at my folks' house around Christmas time.
There you go.
Yeah, because mum refuses to get a dishwasher, just doesn't trust them. So we do it the old-fashioned way, but it's a communal time.
It is a communal time. So again, when I look back, I go, oh, that was quite nice around the dish, or around the sink, not the dishwasher, around the sink and doing the washing, and who would get to wash and who would get to dry, and the various things that happen around that. But there are some houses I go into now and they say, oh, I'd love to put a dishwasher in, but I don't have the room in my house. Yeah. I've got to get it plumbed in. I've got to get some power for that. It's all a bit of a drama.
Little units and stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly right.
Studio apartments.
This little countertop dishwasher, I went straight to the helping out people on the day-to-day basis living in their homes. But it's quite small. It does a full cycle in 15 minutes, only uses 2.6 litres of water, only uses 0.17 kilowatt hours of power. So you need a power point to plug it in, and that's it. But it sits there, and you have a water reservoir next to it that you put a little tube into, and it takes the water from that, uses that to wash the dishes, and away you go. Now, it's not going to do pots and pans. It's not going to do heavy wash like a normal dishwasher might do, but just for the simple meal where you've got a few plates.
Cups and plates and cutlery.
You just go in. I just love how quick it is, 15 minutes and away you go. So now I'm combining the two. So I've got someone who lives in a place that doesn't have a dishwasher. They get one of these, and then when they go camping, they take it with them as well.
The caravans, look, I always it blows me away. Caravans, the what you can fit in those small spaces, but this has just upped the game enormously.
Because I haven't seen even the big Winnebagos, even ones that look like they've got everything. I don't know if they've got a dishwasher, but I don't remember seeing a dishwasher.
It just seems like such an enormous space usage.
Yeah, it does
for a single purpose.
So having this little thing there for caravanners, for people out on boats, maybe for the campers out there, fantastic. But it's just a good little use of modern technology to take advantage of everything being shrunk down and then being able to do something that I don't think is a lot of fun.
Keep your eye out for it, folks. Now, maintaining electrical power in areas of extreme isolation is a critical need. Of course, when I say extreme isolation, we're talking bottom of the deep blue sea or outer space, the two frontiers with so much yet to be explored. Now, current battery technology is likely to take up a lot of space, but Matthew, not nuclear batteries.
We've talked about nuclear batteries before.
Or
but
nuclear.
Nuclear. We've talked about them in terms of being a container. So there is some discussion around maybe powering an entire town or small town or maybe a large neighbourhood with a container that you put in that's a nuclear power station effectively. So,
the size of a shipping container.
Yeah. Now, so we often talk about those as being nuclear batteries, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about tiny, tiny batteries here. And I need some help with pronunciation. So I think the element we're talking about is americium.
Or americium, I've always called it.
Right, okay. So, because it's got a C in the middle of it there, which you want to say a K sound to, but I've always said
americium.
Americium. Right, okay. So, the key I'll go again. Americium. Americium, right. So, that's basically nuclear waste at the moment. But when it decays, and it's got a relatively short half-life, I would have thought, in the nuclear world of 7,380 years, so not that long. But when it decays, it basically puts out alpha particles.
Yes.
Some clever researchers have said, what about if we, and it's a long stretch here, what about if we embedded some of those in a polymer crystal and then they were converted to a green glow and then put a photovoltaic cell around that to create electricity from the green glow.
There you go.
And I looked at the process and I went, who would have thought of that? Who would have went, let's go and do this and then this and
Someone
then this.
was trying to go to sleep. It was 4 o'clock in the morning and their mind was just wandering. It had a crazy idea and then...
And that's what happens sometimes, isn't it? That's where I still think, James,
those
we'll
Jerry
need
Maguire
humans.
moments.
Well, that's right. But we'll need humans over AI because I don't know AI is going to have those little light bulb moments in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
By doing all of that, you've effectively got a very small, and I'm talking millimetre-sized quartz cell here, very small battery that can last easily decades. And you think, well, with a half-life of 7,280 years, that should go a long time. But what actually happens is the components around there start to get broken down because they're being bombarded with a bit of
alpha particles.
Yeah, alpha particles, that's right. So if you were going to take something to deep blue sea and have some sort of monitoring down the bottom of the ocean, fantastic. This could be something you could use to power that for decades. If you're sending off a space mission, for example, that needs to have something monitoring something for decades, sure. I even started to think about bridges often have the Internet of Things as a part of a bridge to just monitor what's happening with stresses in a bridge or any movement in a bridge. Well, you don't want to say everything's fine on that bridge, but not realise the battery's gone flat and so you're getting no signals back. So putting something like this into some of those sensors. So anything that needs long battery life, I'm not talking about, I wish my quadcopter drone would fly for a bit longer. I'm talking about decades of battery life, but also small amounts of power. Because at the moment, you would need approximately 40 billion of these batteries to power a 60-watt light bulb. So,
okay.
We've got a little way to go in terms of increasing the power, but also a little way to go in terms of what could you use them for. And it really is low power consumption. there's hope that they might even get to the stage where they could power things that the human body might need, like a pacemaker.
Right.
So rather than have a pacemaker that you've got to get replaced after a certain number of years or might have some sort of limited battery life, then you put something like this in. So imagine...
Makes perfect sense. Although, I wonder how people would feel about having americium inside their...
That's what I was wondering. We're just putting some nuclear waste in you.
It's, alpha particles are fairly easily, you can protect yourself from them fairly well. But if there is an issue, then they're the highest ionising ones. So you've got to be careful about that. Look, we use americium in smoke detectors.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that it's the key ingredient in a smoke detector.
And obviously they're protected well enough that we don't see them being bombarded
that's right.
with alpha particles with every smoke
Well, you
detector.
can defend yourself from alpha particles with a piece of paper, but it's I guess it's still that worry that you've got
Inside
yourself
your body.
in such close proximity.
Right. I can see people walking
There's
around.
a stigma there.
I can see people walking around now underneath their smoke detectors with a piece of paper over their head. Going, I'm protected. James said I'll be right now. I'm protected. So, but it does sound quite incredible, doesn't it, to have
Absolutely.
a battery like that? And then you start to think about what are the possibilities, because when we talk about a nuclear power plant, it's really the same as a coal-fired power plant. It's using something to heat up water. So the basic concept is pretty simple. You heat up water, turns it into steam, it goes and increases in volume by 1,600 times or thereabouts and spins a turbine. So even though we think of a nuclear power station as being modern and progressive, it's basically the same concept as coal. It's just using something else to heat it up. But this is a bit different, using the actual decay to create electricity. I thought that was absolutely fascinating. And I really did just that process of step by step to get to the end. I just wonder. I want to talk to the person who came up with those series of steps.
Now, we've had a couple of stories in the past about night vision goggles here on Tech Talk. It's become quite a dynamic field of technology. The latest development sees engineers leaning into OLED technology. It's lightweight and more compact than the relatively clumsy-looking low-light amplifying night vision that is the current option. Matt, it may be time for a new spin on the good old-fashioned game of murder in the dark.
Yeah, or I think of the murder movies you see where there's always a bad guy
And
walking around with
lurking
the
in
big
the dark,
goggles.
and he's got those big goggles that stick out a mile.
That's right. And then someone flicks a light on and they get blinded. Although the good guys always seem to be able to lift up their goggles before the light
Just
comes
in
on.
time, yeah.
They read the script, obviously. They read ahead. So this is quite fascinating. Now, those night vision goggles, the big bulky ones, they've got a large power source. They amplify any light. Now, you still have to have some light, but typically there is some light available there that we can't see very well. But those big bulky ones amplify that by about 10,000 times. So that's good, but they're pretty big and bulky. These new OLEDs we're talking about amplify the light by about 100 times. So not quite as good as the big bulky goggles, but there's a few advantages. For a start, the device itself is thinner than a human hair. So we've got another measurement here, James.
Oh,
so forget the SI units.
Yeah, well, the human hair's a common one.
It is a common one, but I don't know how thick it is. I pluck a hair off my head. I go, oh, yeah,
That's
pretty
thin.
thin. That's right. So if I get more technical about it, the thickness of the OLED is less than a micron. So a micron being a micro or 10 to the minus 6 metres or 0.001 millimetres if we want to use some sort of standard that everyone accepts as a general
millionth
standard.
of a metre.
A millionth of a metre, correct. So pretty thin, less than a human hair, let's say that. So effectively it can be coated across a normal set of glasses. It can be something that you had just a clear screen on and you put it across there. They use power still, but very low amounts of power. So the amount of power you need, probably you could have enough battery power just in the arms of a pair of glasses.
Yeah.
So you could put these on, turn the power on, they'd probably go for an hour or two. And then how could you use them? And I started thinking people go for walks at night time, early in the morning, for example, before the sun comes up.
Yep.
That'd be a great way just to have a bit better vision. I know when I go riding my bike early in the morning, I've got good lights that see down the road, but off to the side where kangaroos tend to lurk, I don't always have great vision off to the side. So that'd be a way to use them. Of course, I can see bad guys using them in movies, but let's put some more practical uses in place.
And when your kids have got sleepovers, there's murder in the dark.
Murder in the dark, that's right. That's probably the most important reason you would use them. But it is quite fascinating how we're going and attacking this. And I'm not convinced that it's a really big problem we need to address, but someone out there is thinking it is. And this all came out of Penn State University, but the research funding came from DARPA. So the government, the US government in this case, probably thinks it's important enough to go and do something with it. So who knows what they're planning.
Don't forget, we keep talking about how technology is developed and then someone finds a use for it.
Yeah, well, that's true too. So I'm being a bit harsh on it there. So I can hardly wait till this is developed further and then see what we do with it.
Prosthetic technology is moving fast now as we head towards the second quarter of the 21st century. And the importance of creating functional artificial hands that operate like the real thing has become a high priority. A new design has entered the prototype phase with some notable success, and it doesn't need wiring in, Matt.
It's interesting you say the second half or second quarter.
Second quarter,
and it's not that long ago. I
feels
felt like
we just celebrated the turn of the millennium.
Well, I remember back in the 90s thinking, wow, imagine the New Year's Eve party we'll have in 1999. So, and even Prince mentioned in his song, party like it's 1999.
Did you ever watch that show Towards 2000?
Yeah,
That was a fantastic show.
It was, and then turned into Beyond 2000. That's right, because now, well, you'd have to call it towards 2100 maybe, or 2050. But, wow, time's getting away from us, James. We must be getting old. So in this particular example, we've got a prosthetic hand, and there are a lot of people across the world that need prosthetics, hands, arms, feet, legs, etc. Mm-hmm. But in this particular one, there have been some magnets employed underneath the skin, in the muscles, if you like, of the arm that's left. And so they did an experiment on this one particular guy who lost his hand. And in those magnetics or the magnets in there, they're then linked up to his hand. So they put the hand on and it goes over his arm. And by twitching, manoeuvring those muscles in what's left of his arm, that can control the hand. Now, there's no link, there's no physical link between the hand and the rest of his arm apart from it senses those magnets. So I imagine that what you'd do is you'd think about moving a muscle, twitching a muscle, the same way we might think about moving a finger.
Well, we talked about neuroplasticity,
yeah,
and it might be the thought you have when you go walking, and that now triggers the thumb.
So I think it'll take a bit of training, but this guy's had it for 6 weeks. This one that I watched a video of, he's had it for 6 weeks so far, and he was able to open a jar. So use his normal hand, the prosthetic, to open a jar.
Wow.
Pick up something like a clothes peg. That's pretty tricky.
Yeah.
Opening a clothes peg and releasing it on the clothesline.
Yeah.
That's pretty tricky. You don't think about it much, but it's.
Well, we're constantly finding this balance between precision and power when we're using our hands. But we just do it automatically now. You've been learning how to use your hands since you were a baby.
That's right.
But to develop that ability in someone who is a full-grown adult, that's a tricky thing.
And it is. I think it does come back to that neuroplasticity where you're looking at your brain is able to make new connections.
An amazing thing.
So in a very short period of time, he was able to start controlling his hand and getting better at it literally every day just by using the muscles that were left in his forearm.
Yeah, wow.
So again, I'm just not sure where we're going to end up with this. We know we've got Neuralink. We know we've got people looking at brain scans. Do you start thinking about something and doing it? Do you need something installed in your arm? Well, yes, at this stage. But then do they start doing some testing where they say, let's monitor brain waves while we're looking at what happens with the muscles, and then eventually you don't need those magnets installed in your muscles. You just think about it, and we can wire that prosthetic hand to actually do it. So it's getting better all the time.
Well, and the other thing that I'm getting a sense of is that the idea of prosthetics for hands in particular is a much better option than the alternative, which is to get a hand transplant. So we've been able to do hand transplants for at least 20 years now. However, they haven't all been successful. You might as well have had a prosthetic hand put on that didn't have full functionality. But there's also, you've got to take drugs to immunosuppressants to stop your immune system from rejecting the hand. There's also the thought of chewing someone else's fingernails. Sorry, that's a bit gross, folks. But if you look into hand transplants, it doesn't seem like a very good option at all.
And I always feel that little part that someone else has probably died in a car accident for me to have his or her hand. So you there's that part of it. Look, there's nothing else. I didn't cause that person to die, but you just feel like,
Yeah,
gee.
and you'd be constantly looking at the hand. That's a constant reminder.
Yeah.
But yeah, prosthetics, it's a big one for the hands.
The other big advantage, of course, is you mentioned Steve Austin, the $6 million
Yes,
man.
I love it.
Surely, if I'm going to get a prosthetic hand, I want something that's got 10 times the amount of power. When that friend comes to me that I've never really liked from school and shakes hands and says, how are you?
Yeah,
I'm gonna
crush him.
crush
Look
his
him in the
hand.
eye and crush their hand
Right.
while the noise plays. The
Well, I think that should be part of the prosthetics as well, just having that noise.
soundtrack, yes. The story of the nuclear accident at 3 Mile Island of March 1979 is one that created quite a scare and brought much paranoia at the time of for the field of nuclear generated power. But it also brought a number of lessons that changed the way nuclear power has been generated over the last 45 years. Well, 45 years is a long time, but there's still a grey shroud hanging over 3 Mile Island. Not enough to spook the folks at Microsoft away from powering up its AI dreams, Matt.
So, do you think that really did fuel an anti-nuclear movement?
Oh, it definitely did.
Yeah.
This story prompted me to go back and have a look at some video, and there was a real push against, only for about 5 to 10 years.
Right.
Yeah, things went quiet because 3 Mile Island happened. No one was killed.
Yep.
It was just a scare, a really nasty scare. The China Syndrome was a movie that was made effectively about that. Chernobyl was a bigger deal because people died, and half of Europe got poisoned. Well, we think it may still be poisoned.
Yep.
But 3 Mile Island just gave everyone a big scare.
And I think there were some good things to come out of 3 Mile Island.
Yeah, for
where
sure.
They said, oh, we should look at our safety standards. We should look at some things, because I think it was one of those things where you saw a series of small things that on their own wouldn't have been a big issue. But
And
when
nuclear
you
power had
them,
been promoted as completely safe. Up to that point, it was like, nothing could go wrong here, nothing could go wrong. And then a couple of sequences went a little bit wrong, and all of a sudden they realised we've got a situation on our hands.
Yeah, it's interesting. So in this scenario, it's the first nuclear power plant that's been brought back online or will be brought back online. So typically when they've shut down a nuclear power plant for whatever reason, that's it. It stayed offline. So this is the first one coming back online, and it is fueled by Microsoft's insatiable demand for power. There's just so much power needed, mainly around AI, to create all the AI queries. When we go and say, hey, I'm a bit bored, tell me something, then that uses power. And each search on something like ChatGPT uses 10 times more electricity than just a Google search, because it's got to do so much more work to actually produce that answer for us. So Microsoft said, we need power. We want to be carbon negative by 2030. We're just running out of sources of renewable, wind or solar. So what are we going to do? So they've gone to the owners of the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant and said,
Who'd rubbed their hands together and gone, finally,
that's right,
this is more than a museum.
we knew we were going to get it there someday. So they're going to turn this back on, which I think is a little bit more complicated than just flicking a switch. They're going to turn it back on. They're going to spend $1.6 billion turning it back on. So they're going to replace transformers, restore turbines, upgrade the cooling systems. That might be important after the 1979 incident. And essentially, they're going to start producing power for Microsoft, about 835 megawatts peak power output for it. That would do about 700,000 homes. So it gives you an idea of just the amount of power that we're talking about. Now, Meta and Google, they've also got issues with enough power for all the work they're doing. They've been looking at other sort of energy sources, geothermal power, what other renewables are out there. We know that Bill Gates, we talked before about those small nuclear reactors in containers. Bill Gates has been investing in some of those. So there's lots of different ways to produce cleaner power than we've got now. And the big guys are playing around with this to try and get to the point where they can produce that, because carbon neutral is one thing. Carbon negative is pretty impressive if you can actually get to that point in time. So I do wonder about the people around Pennsylvania, what they think of this. I think most people in the US now are comfortable with nuclear power. Are people around 3 Mile Island comfortable with this? Well, maybe, maybe not. But the company that owns this, Constellation Energy, is renaming the plant. So no longer will it be the 3 Mile Island plant, because that has some negative connotations.
That's right. The paranoia will go crazy.
And in what is a marketing step, I'm sure it's going to be called the Crane Clean Energy Centre. So you're just going to keep emphasising that model or message that it's about clean energy. So the Crane Clean Energy Centre, which is interesting because I do find it fascinating sometimes when we name things that aren't exactly what they are. So 3 Mile Island, I always thought was because it was 3 miles long, roughly, and so you call it 3 Mile Island. But it's actually named because it's 3 miles downstream from Middleton. So it was more named from how far away it was. But I started thinking of some other ones as well. The 100-Year War, I think that's 100 years, 116 years the 100-Year War went for. Greenland, not much green there, mainly ice. Iceland, not much ice, mainly green. So, and the Spanish flu is my other favourite one. It didn't start in Spain. You not logically think that the Spanish flu, obviously that originated in Spain and then spread from there, but Spain was the first to report it, but it didn't actually start in Spain. So anyway, we've got some funny names out there for different things.
I wonder if the residents of 3 Mile Island will be fooled.
Yeah. Glad we haven't got that 3 Mile Island nuclear reactor. We've got the Crane Clean Energy Centre now. That's much better than the 3 Mile Island nuclear reactor.
Because they all had to get evacuated back in 79. And so they basically had to grab whatever they could and just get out. And they evacuated the town very effectively while they spent billions of dollars trying to clean up what mess they'd created.
And as you say, no one died from it, but do we know if anyone had some long-term impacts from it?
Well, certainly there was radiation leak there, yeah.
So anyway, we need more power. We have to get it from somewhere. Nuclear seems like potentially one of the places to get it.
For the longest time, the humble calculator has been a tool designed for good. They make square roots and trigonometry so much more palatable than any other method, and don't even get me started on exponential functions and natural logs. Apart from cheekily spelling out the word boobs, the standard calculator has always maintained its innocence. Until now, when it appears that some clever cookie has tuned their calculator into ChatGPT and maths exams can no longer be protected.
I put this story in just for you. I knew this would give you some heart palpitations. And I remember when we were doing, it might have been a year 12, but definitely at university, you had the standard engineering calculator, which was a much bigger calculator than normal and had a much bigger keyboard because it did engineering functions because they figured that people in the real world wouldn't need to remember that in ridiculously complicated formula. They just use some sort of computer or calculator to calculate that for you. So that made sense. But this guy, he's posted on YouTube how he did it. He's basically said he's made the ultimate cheating device. So he's taken a standard Texas Instruments TI-84, so an engineering calculator, and he thought, I wonder if I can just get this to connect to the internet and then get it to connect to ChatGPT. And so he played around with it. He got a little $8 device that allowed him to get some external connection, put that into it, basically wired that in, then put a few extra programming steps in there, and then got to the stage where you could type a question to ChatGPT and up would come the answer. Now, it's a bit clumsy because it's only got a fairly small screen and only got a limited amount of information you can look at and get from it. But if you were stuck in an exam and punching on your calculator, the examiner watching over you would think nothing. There's a student really keen on punching through those numbers on his calculator. And he also engaged a small component that said, hit this button, and it goes back to being just a normal Texas Instruments engineering calculator. So anyone that comes and says, give me a look at that, son, you pick it up and goes, yep, that looks fine to me. And then you go back to the normal cheating mode. So
the cat's out of the bag. We're going back to slide rules.
Well, maybe we just get back to all bets are off. There are some people who want a version of the Olympics where you're allowed to use drugs and cheat. Yeah. It's a bit like that. It's almost like, do we just throw our hands in the air and say, we know you're going to cheat somehow, so all bets are off. You can cheat to your heart's content, but we're going to make the questions 10 times harder knowing you've got access to all this information. That's right. People used to get excited about open book exams, and I'd say, no, open book exams aren't that good because you've got all these really tough questions because they know you've got all the basic information there. So,
And speaking of AI and its clever party tricks, CAPTCHA tests, those security tests where you need to pick the squares containing motorbikes and traffic lights, etc. Well, apparently AI is getting pretty good at those now too, Matt.
Well, they do better than I do because this
they're terrible.
It gets 100%. This guy developed this system and he said he went through and did a whole range of tests, kept testing it, and he got past the CAPTCHA with AI every single time. That's better than me. Some of those pictures.
That bit of the traffic light, that little bit that's just jutting into a corner like it's just a millimetre in.
The one that gets me is name every bicycle, every picture with a bicycle, and I see the cyclist's head.
Yes.
And I think, is that a part of the bicycle or is it just his head? Which way do I go? And inevitably, whichever way I go, I get another picture presented, which means I didn't get it right the last time. So they've gone to the stage where they fed 14,000 image pairs into an AI tool and said, here is the one that does have a picture of a fire hydrant or a bicycle or a traffic light or whatever. Here's the one that doesn't. Learn on all that, and now let's let you use. Now, one little thing that's a good one to stick in the back of your mind for your next friendly family barbecue is CAPTCHA. Stands for Completely Automated Public Turing Test to Tell Computers and Humans Apart. I think Alan Turing would be quite impressed that they're using his name still. 1950 he talked about the Turing test. So here we are 74 years later and they're using Turing as part of the acronym there for CAPTCHA.
Tip of the cap to Alan Turing.
That's right. So it is getting that stage where it is difficult to tell computers and humans apart because a CAPTCHA test was one of those ways. The whole idea of a CAPTCHA test, of course, is that you don't want your website that might have a form on it, might have information on there. You don't want it being bombarded by bots extracting information or filling in information and sending information through. So a CAPTCHA test is a way of stopping that. So a human must click on those different buttons correctly and then they're allowed to go and fill in the form or get that download or whatever that might be required. So if suddenly you get to the stage where AI can get past all that, well, bots can go crazy now. They can just use that and get past all of it. So it's certainly something that's difficult. Google have got a concept where they've moved away from those visual challenges and they've got some invisible concepts in the background of different forms now, looking at mouse movements, looking at different things that you do. But how long before AI says, right, I know that I need to randomly move a mouse and randomly move it at random periods of time to make it look like I'm a human, and then it'll get past those. Each time we come up with something better to stop the bots, then someone's coming up with something to let the bots through.
No. Oh dear, it's an interesting world we live in. Now, fans of the Superman story will be all too familiar with his fortress of solitude, his crystal castle located up at the North Pole. And if you recall the classic 1978 film, he has a big computer with all his home movies from Krypton stored in crystals. Apparently, as I'm finding out now, that is actually a thing. Storing data in a crystal is not only a possibility, but it's likely to become the preferred method for storing extremely big data sets like the human genome, for example. Matt, what's the big deal about crystals and memory space?
A lot of things, but it's interesting. So that was 78, was it, that Superman
Yeah, it
came
certainly
out?
was.
Rightio. So 77 was when the Voyager spacecraft was sent off, and you may remember they had lots of images, music, things about humans, so that if some extraterrestrial alien being found this Voyager spacecraft in some hundreds, thousands, billions of years, they'd be able to have information about humans. I think 55 different languages were on there.
Yeah.
Carl Sagan had the job of curating that. Imagine that job. Yeah. We've got to capture.
Got to talk to aliens.
That's right. Everything about humans in a something that they could access, maybe, but supposedly they're advanced technology when this comes across them.
It's got a map of the solar system with where we are as well.
Yeah, so you can come and invade. That's where we've got to go and attack. So that would have been fascinating. And maybe that was part of the idea in the 78 movie of Superman where they went, let's have something from his home planet, but let's have everything from his home planet rather than this was just
do you remember he's feeding these crystals into the thing and then Jor-El or Marlon Brando comes up and his image came up.
In a hologram type image, that's right, very advanced. So the big thing about using a crystal is that it can be stored for a long time, which may be why they gave it to Superman and said, here you go, because we don't know how long before you'll use this. But in human concept, the lifespan for a 5D crystal storing information, storing data, is approximately 300 quintillion years. So that's not too bad. Yeah. Thank goodness for that.
I can get some family photos on there.
That's right. That should be good for a few generations to come. If the temperature's got a bit extreme, for example, if you heated the crystal up to 190 degrees Celsius, the lifespan does drop back to about 13.8 billion years, which just happens to be the life of the universe so far. So it's not too bad in terms of a way of storing things. If you store things in some sort of digital storage media, then it's so subject to degradation over a fairly short period of time. But if you get any sort of large magnetic field, if you get extremes in temperature, then you lose that information. So not great to store information in that way. So what they do with this is they laser etch the different information into layers that are about 20 nanometers wide as you go through in this crystal.
Wow.
Now, the first question I had is, great, someone finds this in a number of years' time. I'm talking a long time away. How do they know how to read it? So I've got this crystal thing. Oh, that's cute. I'll hang it around my neck. That's something that gives me good luck.
It's like you've got all those VHS tapes.
That's right. Where's the video recorder? So it's quite impressive, though, what they've done in terms of an experiment, if you like. So long lifetime, long lifespan, and it can survive direct impact forces of 10 tonnes per square centimetre. So that's not too bad as well.
That's not too bad.
They've gone to all the trouble of getting a Guinness World Record for the most durable digital storage medium. So it seems like a trivial one to me, but anyway, apparently it's a big thing. And what they've done with it, the main thing is they've basically put the human genome onto this crystal and said, there you go.
Nice.
So if the human race is extinct in some number of millions of years, then here's all the information you need to recreate a human. Interesting.
Yeah. It's all A's, T's, G's and C's, by the way, and they've got to interpret what to do with that. But I was just going to say that they printed out the human genome, and it's in volumes, and I don't know where it's kept. That wouldn't be too hard to find out. But it sits in lever arch files, and it basically takes up a room.
Right.
And they're jam-packed, newspaper print-sized A's, T's, G's and C's.
Yep.
23 volumes, each with 4 or 5 different lever arch file bound, folders, whatever.
Yep.
An enormous amount of information.
Yep. So what they've done with this is they've stored this in the Memory of Mankind archive in Hallstatt, Austria. So we might have talked about that before. It's underground, temperature
Sounds
controlled, and something that hopefully, if all of human race ceases to exist and someone finds our planet in millions of years' time, they might just say, let's go to Austria, where it used to be Austria, the place formerly known as Austria, and then find this little crystal there. I'm not sure how big it is, actually, but it seems like a lot of work to go to for something that we hope doesn't happen. And then if it does happen, do we care? Because we're not here to care about it anymore.
Yeah, I know. You'd just be starting from scratch, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Well, whatever the beings were at that time, if these other guys couldn't keep this planet alive, then we really want them back. We really want to recreate them.
Back?
That's right. We've learned from them and we've moved on.
And on that fantastical note, it's time to welcome the Von Trapp family singers into the studio to bid you all adieu. Ladies and gentlemen, the Von Trapp family singers. What a time to get stage fright, kids. I said one more chance. Now get out! Thank you, Matt, for another absolutely cracking tech talk.
I was a bit worried that I was meant to start singing then. Thinking, James knows I can't sing.
Pressure is on. I didn't bring you into that joke to start off with. I probably should have given you a heads up.
Oh, no, that's all right.
Well, I'm off to watch old episodes of The $6 Million Man and then maybe the original Superman movie. Honey, a round of popcorn, if you will. I'm not calling you honey, by the way. That was a shout out to my lovely wife.
Oh, good.
Hopefully she'll make me some popcorn. Thanks for tuning into another Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Here at Tech Talk, we pride ourselves in producing the finest, most crystal clear Tech Talk that you'll find anywhere on the planet. That is our solemn promise. I'm your host, James Eddy, and I hope that you've enjoyed our little podcast enough to tune in next time when we hand deliver yet another episode in 1 week's time. In the meantime, you have another week to get your friends organised so they may join us as well. Until then, take care and we'll catch you on the flip side.